Now that you know what value graph is, in this video, I'm going to show you how to animate with value graph.
Now here we have a file with 3 types of icons. And we're going to animate the 3 icons with value graph, something that I showed you before. But before we do that, I want to show you the bad example and what most people do. Here, we have an animated version. So here's what I have. So this type of animation, I only applied the default easing to all the keyframes. If I hit U here, you can see I put 2 keyframes and then I easy ease them with system default easy ease. That's the animation that I have. And a lot of animators, they just stop there. So this is considered a bad example, is what most animators do. They just put 2 keyframes and they use the default easing, nothing else to it. But there's a lot you can do with value graph to just manipulating the spacing of the keyframes to get a different type of animation. And I'm here today to show you how to do that. This is not what we want. Let's start with a brand new composition. And this one I haven't animated yet, but we're gonna call it a good example. Now, let me just show you what I have here. So basically, the first 3 layers, if I toggle between the eye icon here, you can see this is a clock I have. First, this one is the clock body, and then I have a clock handle, and then the check mark. This one, the green layer, we have this arrow here, down arrow, and then this globe here. And now the third one, I have a pen here, and then all those content on the board, and then this notebook here. Last layer I have is a background. Okay, so that's all we have. First, let's put the green layer, this globe, to the first layer so that we can animate the globe first. Let's zoom in, hit on Z, and then drag with your mouse. First of all, let's identify this layer. And then I have the anchor point right in the center. If you don't, by the way, if you're not seeing the same panel as my After Effects, you can go to Windows, Workspace, and then just choose Standard Work Layout. If you are still not seeing it, just reset Standard Layout to Save Layout. This way, you're gonna get a default standard layout. And now we should be seeing the same thing. Let's go to the scale. Just hit S on keyboard, and then let's put in a keyframe. I want to drag this timeline, make it bigger. And so I want this icon to stop maybe after 15 frames. Command Shift right arrow, go forward 10 frames, and then Command right arrow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can see right now we're at 15 frames. Hit the stopwatch here, add a keyframe, and then go back, change the scale to 0. Now we have a movement here for the globe. So what I want to do is go to the curves editor, fit the graph to view. Let's select keyframes, and then hit F9, easy ease. Now what I want to do is I want this to pop in. So I want the globe to start from 0, but then pick up speed and slowly just stop at 100%. So I want the speed to be faster around this front portion of the animation and then slowly easing into position. Let's see what I got here. Let's click off the layer, and then it's still too slow. So what I want to do is just drag this handle all the way, give it more energy, something like this. Let's preview. Yeah, that looks cool. That's pretty good. And then go back to the timeline, make the timeline smaller. we can just copy this already animated keyframes onto this arrow here. Command V, we should have the same animation for the two elements. However, since it's a down arrow, it should have a coming down like a momentum somehow. So I also want to change the position property, hit P, and then at this point here, I want the arrow to stop moving, and then around 0 second, I want the arrow to come down from the top. And there's one thing I want to point out. Going forward, I want you to, every time you animate the position property, I want you to right click separate dimensions. This is so important. If you're working with value graph, you have to separate dimensions for the X and Y position and animate those separately. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to, because think about it, value graph, it's time versus value. But then if you have position, it's X and Y value, it's two different values. So if you want to animate with value graph, you have to separate the dimension of X and Y so that you can just control one of the value. So it's so important. It's key here is to just right click the position property and then separate dimensions. Now I can check off this X position because we are only concerned with Y position, and then I just want to drag this Y position up. Let's preview this. The arrow just comes down, but it's got no energy because we didn't modify the graph yet. Just go to the value graph, hit on this fit to view, and then select the two keyframes, F9, easy ease, and then I want a similar curve here for the arrow so that the animation is consistent. Now let's go back and preview. Something like that. It's got more energy to it, definitely. Looks nice. Now let's do the same thing for the second icon. This first layer is a clock. So I want the clock to animate in the same as the globe. I just want to copy this scale property, put it on the clock here, go to 0 second. Also, you need to make sure the anchor point, the point where the animation is based off, need to stay in the center. If you go top here, this pan behind tool can allow you to move around the anchor point. Let's say if I have the anchor point on the top here, if I go to rotation, hit on R, and I rotate, I'm gonna rotate based off that anchor point position. That's not what I want. So I just wanna go back. I want the clock to come in from the center. Another thing that we need to pay attention to is that the hand of the clock need to come in with the clock. So what I need to do here is just to select the layer of this hand and then use this pick whip icon to just drag and then parent it to the clock so that when the clock moves, the hand moves with it. Let's just change back to the original position. And now what I want to do is right click position property, separate dimensions. Maybe around 15 seconds, I want the clock to settle in position. And then go back. I want the clock to move up so that I can make the Y position, just drag it to the right so that it moves down from 0 seconds so it comes up like that. So that's the animation. Something like that. And then now I want to modify the graph editor. Just go to the value graph. And then remember how we select the two keyframes? Another way you can select two keyframes is that just double click on the Y position. Now, if I click one time, you can see the keyframes that are not selected. If I double click, these two keyframes are selected. And then I can hit on F9, easy ease. But this time, I want this clock to ease in position. I want the clock to shoot up fast and then easing into position. Something like that. Something like that. Let's go back to the timeline here. Let's see what we have. It's still a little abrupt. I think it's because another thing I want to do is for the clock, I don't want the clock to show at the beginning. I only want the clock to show when it's moving. So what I need to do is just click on this layer and put the mouse at the beginning of the layer. Just drag it back a few frames so that the clock doesn't show up at the beginning. And now you can only see a hand, but then I need to drag the hand as well. Now let's preview this. You see that? It's subtle but nice. You can see this clock is not showing at the beginning, but when it appears on the screen, although it's sudden, but it's got a very subtle movement easing into the position. So I want the clock to come in maybe a little earlier so that I drag the two layers. Something like that. See that? It looks good. And now it comes to the clock hand. This one I just wanted to move, just hit R. I don't just want the hand to just rotate constantly, because this is going to be an icon animation, which it's going to be static at the end. So I just want this hand to rotate, stop there. But then when it comes in, I want it to just maybe rotate from negative 200 something degree. Something like that. And let's hit F9, easy ease, go to the value graph. Add a bit more easing to it. Just use this S curve, give it more energy. Let's see what it looks like. So another thing is I don't want it to stop at the beginning. I want to start moving already when it comes in. So what I need to do is I'm thinking, just change it to this type of curve so that the hand is already moving. It's already got a speed at 0 seconds when it comes into the frame, so that it's not just starting to move when it comes in. I want the hand to start moving already when it comes in, and then easing into position. Something like that. Let's see. Or maybe the motion is too much. Maybe I can change it back to negative 150 instead of negative 230. Yep, something like that. It works. And now it's our check mark. So the clock comes in, and then for the check mark, it's easy. Let's just copy the globe here and then go to 0 second, put the cursor, timeline indicator at 0 second. Select this check mark, Command V, paste it in place. Let's preview this. Something like that. Looks pretty nice. Let's save the project.